Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Graziano of WorkLiberated, and I'm here with Marissa Ingrasci. Did I say it right?
You did.
Of the Hoffman Process. And Marissa actually was one of my 4 trainers when I did the Hoffman Process in Petaluma, California. And why I signed up and registered to do the Hoffman Process is I was looking to close some gaps in how I lead, in actually how I organize my work life, and in how I pick and choose people to be in my circle. And so here she is. Marissa, would you tell us a little bit about Hoffman Process and yourself? And then we'll get into deeper questions.
Sure. Yeah. So the Hoffman Process is a week-long retreat. It's our primary offering. We're a nonprofit organization, and we offer it on both coasts. We have a campus in Petaluma, which Maji, you were at with me, and then we've got a campus in Connecticut. And it's a little bit hard to describe what the Hoffman Process is, but it's personal growth and transformation, looking through the lens of family of origin, how we learned patterned ways of being to navigate our childhood totally unconsciously. And it has nothing to do with having good or bad parents. It's just the human condition of what we picked up, how to navigate, and then looking at those ways of being, those patterns of behavior, and changing, transforming, because what worked then doesn't necessarily work so well now as an adult. So that's a bit about the Hoffman Process. And then I'm a teacher of the Hoffman Process and a coach, and have been for the past 5 years. I don't know, is that a good blurb on me and the process?
Yeah, that's good. And so to be clear, if you're looking for liberation at work, you're probably also looking for liberation everywhere in life. And part of liberation is having an empowering context to operate from, to live from, to work from. And it all begins with cultivating the leader inside. So Marissa, let's begin with you distilling the 4 aspects of self.
Yes. So we teach this quadrinity model. That's the word that Bob Hoffman coined over 50 years ago, quadrinity, to describe the 4 aspects of self, which most people will find pretty familiar. You know, most people are familiar with mind, body, spirit. This adds emotional self into the picture. So what we consider the 4 aspects of self are our intellect, our emotional self, our bodies, and our spiritual selves. And spiritual self simply means higher self, intuition, authenticity. It's not something outside of ourselves, but really, if I were to describe who the internal leader is, that is who the internal leader is what we call your spiritual self. You at your essence, you without patterns, without those patterns learned in childhood. So, yeah.
Without the defensive,ness, without the annoyance, without the agitation, the hyper sense of urgency, all that stuff.
Without all of that and so many other things.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about intellect. What do you mean by intellect? Like, am I smart? What does that mean?
So what we call our intellect, what we're referring to is that mind aspect of the thoughts that go through our minds, the belief systems that we have in place, limiting beliefs. Most people don't even know that the beliefs they have are limiting. They think it's just the way the world works because that's what they were taught. So when we're referring to intellect and the patterns of the intellect, we're talking about all of that kind of stuff, the limiting beliefs, the intellectual patterns, overthinking, overworrying, obsessing.
Now, does the intellect have any positive qualities?
Yes, of course. We need our intellects for good judgment, for discernment, I mean, God, we need our intellects for so much. And I think that it's important, certainly, not to demonize our intellect, even though it can oftentimes really get in the way when it's activated in that negative sense. But our intellects keep us safe every day and help us make good choices.
Yeah. So I remember once I was in a neuroscience class, and they talked about the two hemispheres of the brain. And I'm not going to go deep into this, but there's the right hemisphere, which is really the more creative and the more intuitive, and it you can see the whole. And the left hemisphere is about structure and systems and process and categorizing. And when you were just talking, it's like intellect is us when we're operating with an integrated right and left hemisphere, and we're above the power and freedom line. We're in courage, engagement, innovation, synchronicity. But where it becomes a dark little demon is when we're in frustration or fear or despair. Because down there, then the intellect gets the best of us. That's that voice that just is telling us who we're not and what's wrong with everybody on the planet, including us.
Yeah. And I want to add too, that even though we have, what we would call patterns of the intellect, it's also totally normal. We need and are wired to have a negative bias in our brains. It's what over the evolution has kept us safe, right? It's better to mistake a stick for a snake and keep ourselves safe. So over time, certainly in our modern culture, negative stuff sticks like, glue. And oftentimes the positive stuff is like Teflon, just slips right off. We're not able to, I would say most people struggle with being able to recognize what they do well, and can be really hyper-focused on what's wrong, what they could have done better. And all of that, there's an emotional component to that too, certainly, but definitely is our intellect's attempt at keeping us safe. And it's counterintuitive. It doesn't usually work.
So now let's talk about the emotional self, because that's the second piece. Or these are not in order, but tell me about
no order, really. Yeah.
The emotional. There is no order. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's no hierarchy.
What is the
aside
emotional?
From the spiritual self, I'd say that's the leader. But
talk to me about emotional self, good and bad.
Okay. So your emotional self is the feeling component of you, of us. That is, and certainly the positive aspects of our emotional selves are being able to connect, deep empathy with other people, access to our full range of emotions. I feel like anger and grief and fear gets a really bad rap. But it's important to be able to access those emotions because it gives us information about our environment. If we're feeling fear and we're in touch with our fear and what that feels like in our bodies and in our emotional self, that can keep us from real danger. So it's positive qualities are being able to access that full range. And of course, feeling joy and spontaneity and all of that, connection to presence. And then negative components of our emotional selves are getting stuck. I'd say, habitual feeling states and moods. Certainly addiction resides in our emotional self, procrastination, habitually feeling not good enough, shame. We can get stuck in grief. We can even get stuck in being happy all the time.
Yeah, right. So as you were talking, I was thinking, so moods, when left unattended or unaware of, turn into personality traits, and personality traits, when left unattended or unaware of, just become the way the world is. Right. So you've got Mary, the happy Mary, everything is great, not paying attention to fires going off all around her, like Reese Witherspoon in that show, little fires everywhere. And the same with agony. If one thing is agony and I get so used to being in that mood of despair and then I can't see my way out of that. So that's the emotional self. So let's talk about the body.
The body is amazing because it is our physical dwelling that holds all of the aspects. And certainly positive qualities of our bodies are, our mobility, our immune systems, our physical contact with the world, certainly access to our senses and to navigating the world around us in that physical sense, certainly physical connection with other people. And then negative patterns of the body. I think that it's important to note that all patterns, the negative components of both the intellect and the emotional self, also live as a contraction in our bodies. So for anyone listening right now, you might think about a recent time when you were in one of those habitual feeling states that Maji, you were just talking about, or a time when you were obsessing, your intellect was on overdrive, thinking about how trying to cross-reference how everything could go wrong in a particular situation.
You mean like at the beginning of the pandemic?
Right. Oh, that. Yeah. And notice the toll that it takes on your body, because all of that, however subtle, lives as a contraction in our bodies, and shows up in the form of headaches, backaches,
ulcers,
and high blood pressure, certain tones of voice that you hear coming out of your mouth that are very familiar to a parent or a person who took care of you growing up. How even posture, you see family members walking next to each other, and oftentimes their gait is exactly the same, or someone hunches in a particular way as a parent, because we very much mirror the environment in which we grew up in, and our bodies take on that somatic shape and patterning as well. Yeah.
Wow. Also, the body gives signals, right? When something is wrong, when you learn to pay attention,
yes,
you can almost feel yourself. You can almost feel your body getting agitated before you get agitated.
Totally.
Because there's some ping or some pong in the body. So that's been
certainly
very powerful.
Yes,
so,
certainly our nervous systems are great information for us. And we know that trauma is stored in our bodies and in our nervous system. So there's, something that you were just speaking to also, that, oftentimes when we're triggered by something, we do notice it in our bodies first before our intellect is able to put words to it or try to explain what's happening to us.
And then spiritual self. So in the Coaches Training Institute, when I got certified, they used to call that the captain, and then everything else was the crew.
I like that.
Tell me about the captain, the spiritual self. And we'll talk about, then the last thing I want you to answer with regard to that is, how do I find that? Where is it?
Yeah.
Is it on the bookshelf? Like, where is it?
Yeah, totally. So the captain, or the spiritual self, is who we really are. It is us at our essence, our goodness, our authenticity. And I know that's a lot of words for, oh, wouldn't that be nice? If, like, great, that sounds wonderful. And how do I do that? And one way that I guide people to recognize this part of themselves is to think about a time that you were at your best. Whether it was a time with family or friends, or at work, or in a creative project. Most people are familiar with at least glimpses of times in their lives, the birth of a child, when time goes away. And sometimes people describe it as being in the flow, like not aware, just completely present, not aware of time and space. And we've all had moments like this in our lives. And so that is our spiritual self. And the work of the Hoffman process is actually to recognize that all of these patterns, whether they were developed and show themselves through the intellect, through the emotional self, or expressed through our bodies, are actually not who we really are. And that at the core of who we really are is goodness, access to intuition, and ability to make good decisions and be led without having to know what to do. And that's hard, right? I mean, that's about surrender.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's not about living there all the time, because I don't think that's even possible. But it's about getting familiar with that version of ourselves so that we can access it more frequently.
So at the end, towards the end of the podcast, we're actually going to do a quadrinity check. Marissa's going to take us through that. And that is a great practice to get access to all 4 parts of self. And so we'll be doing that today. Aspects, I would say, better than parts. So now talk to me about the right road and the left road. What does that mean? When we were getting ready for this, I was telling you, I was watching that show about the fighting in Ireland. And again, I forget the name of the city.
Belfast.
So the name of the movie is Belfast. And it's this child that's 8 years old, and his living through this literally war zone over religion in his neighborhood. And this is in modern day times. It is 19, like he's my age. So in the 70s, this was going on, and maybe even later. And he goes to a priest, he goes to Sunday mass. And I think they were not Catholics. They were the Presbyterians. And the minister says, there's the right road and there's the road to hell. And I laughed because I thought of Hoffman, and it's not, the left road is not the road to hell unless like your left road is really left. and I'm not talking politics either. So let's make it clear, right road, left road. What does it mean? Why do you have it? Why is it one of your distinctions in your training?
Yeah. So, yes. So certainly we don't hold it in a dogmatic sense, but I think that clip from the movie is an interesting parallel in a certain sense, in that what I hear you say when you talk about that is hearkening back to choice, that there is choice.
Yes.
And we use this model, and of course it's very binary, right? Left and right, or right and wrong. And we use it in the beginning of the week to help make a distinction. And what we guide people through by the end of the week is that actually there isn't such a huge distinction in our lives, that we are always at a choice point. And it's important initially to look at the difference between the two so that we're aware of what the choice is. So that's kind of the reason why we use this, left road, right road. And the imagery that we have with it is there's a stop sign in between the two roads. There's a fork in the road, there's a stop sign, and the stop sign says choice. So the mess of it is that life happens no matter what. You brought up a few moments ago the pandemic, and I think actually that's a really great relatable thing that happened to all of us that wasn't our fault, and that happens in life. Things happen that are completely out of our control, whether that's in the form of losing our jobs, being laid off, the death of someone really close to us, even someone breaking up with us or cheating on us or whatever. Life events happen, and it's up to us to navigate authentically. And one of the tenets of the right road is my life is my responsibility. So whatever happens to me in my life, I am responsible for my responses. In my life is my responsibility is the ability to respond. And then when we look at left road stuff, that's all the, I'm going to use the word programmed for lack of a better word, but the habitual ways of being that, I'm sure for anyone listening right now, if you think about something bad happening, something that you don't want to have happen, whether it's something you could anticipate in the future or something you've already been through, you could immediately jump to the 3 to 5 ways that you'd get in your own way. It's like, oh, well, I would withdraw, beat myself up, blame someone else, or go into caretaking mode, or be hyper vigilant, or whatever it is.
Be defensive,
right? So that's old news, right? We know exactly how that's going to play out, right? I mean, most people would be able to go through the sequence of events. Oh yeah, if I'm fired, then I'm going to do this, I'd do that, I'd get really pissed, I'd tell someone off. I don't know, I'm going through what someone might do. So it's important also to become really clear about that old programming. Yeah. Because when we're not clear about what it is that we individually do, we think it's who we really are. Like, oh, well, I can't help it. That's just what I always do. That's just who I am. And so another tenet of the right road is I am not my patterns. I'm not these learned ways of being. Sure, am I somewhat predisposed to go into them because of my history, and our patterns are also neural pathways, and we've put a lot of tread on them. So are we bad people for going into them? Absolutely not. And yet, when we become really aware of what they are, we also become aware of when we're going into them and using those old defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms that no longer serve us. So that's why we differentiate between left and right.
And it's so funny because I've been involved in this work, and now I teach it in a different way for organizations and for culture. And I'm a coach. So that is what we're doing, is helping people make choices. But what it always amazes me is when people actually don't think they have a choice in how they respond. So there's a lot of layoffs happening right now, and they're going to continue to happen. And people are going into victim mode, or a performance review comes along and somebody gets a score that they're not happy with. And instead of saying, I am 100% responsible for this score, and this is how I am going to shift, they automatically turn it into that there's something wrong with the manager. And really I think that's really sad. And to me, that's the antithesis of liberation, because until you can take and hear feedback about your performance, like an owner of your own life, you repeat those patterns wherever you go.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. Just the faces of the people you surround yourself with change. And then, maybe when you're 45 one day, you say, holy crap, or 55, this thing has been the way it is for 25 years. And if there was one thing you could say to everybody that's listening, or anybody who gets the transcript, when it comes to being trapped in the habituated pattern and telling the truth to yourself about the impacts of that, like living life that way, what would you say has been your biggest learning?
Well, I mean, you just said something that I think is so important, is being able to recognize what the costs and consequences have been of being in those old patterns and ways of being. So, that's part of the awareness of tapping into, wow, what has happened in my life as a result of not taking responsibility for my own reactions and responses.
Or happiness.
Yeah, or happiness. Absolutely. And look, the right road is not, all roses and rainbows and happiness all the time. Certainly, when we're confronted with something like job layoffs, or the illness of a loved one, or the death of a loved one, and this is part of what I was talking about earlier with access to full range of emotion, is that, of course, on our right road, we are going to experience grief and anger and fear. What differentiates the two roads is how we meet that emotion. So the right road is oftentimes an awkward road because we don't have the same kind of tread on it. When I was describing earlier, everyone think of something, and I bet you could think of the, 3 to 5 ways you'd get in your own way in that situation. When we're talking about right road stuff, it's like, oh, I'm stepping into the unknown, into a mystery of discovering as I go along what it means to be present, what it means to take care of myself, and at times what it means to assert myself and have a voice. And that can sometimes be awkward because there isn't as much tread on that right road. So I always encourage people, and I hope this is answering your question, to be really kind and gentle with themselves as they embark upon this work, and really any work that, because personal growth work, it is about choice and self-responsibility, whether it's the Hoffman process or something else.
And it is work.
And it is work. It's hard.
It's another form of work.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. But to be kind and gentle with ourselves is so important.
So that's a good transition to the next point. And when we were talking, we talked about the need to, like, if you really want to make a life change, let's say you are laid off, or you just got a bad performance review, or you walked in and your spouse said, I'm out, or anything, really devastating that would normally put you in a spin cycle of disbelief and frustration and fear and pain. We call it being below the line at Keen Alignment. We talked about the need for a guide and or a process, like going at it alone. Like, you could read a book on this stuff. There is a book called The Hoffman Process. There are books from Fernando Flores on transformation and trust. And there are books, I'm sure, about Werner Erhard and the Landmark Forum, or Erhard Training and LifeSpring. But what's the difference between a book and a class, whether it's the Hoffman Process or any training?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite phrases that defines or explains what you're talking about is that, information is not transformation. Information is really, really good. Our intellects need to be able to wrap our minds, so to speak, around concepts and get behind them and, like, all right, yeah, this I agree with this. I'm in alignment with this, right? So that's important. And we learned this stuff, talking about Hoffman Process now, because we look through family of origin, but we learned these habitual ways of being before our intellect was even developed. I mean, most of it is so young, that we learned about or mislearned about who we really are, what we needed to do to belong and feel loved in our families. So we took this stuff on unconsciously, and it's counterintuitive to believe or think that you can think your way out of something that you learned before you could think.
Say that again. That's really, really good.
Yeah, that's
the quote. Let's use that as a quote.
Yeah, you can't think your way out of something that you learned before you could think. So our intellect is fantastic and helps us so much. And yet there are many things, including shame, which is a normal part of being human, that we feel, and that's pre-verbal, that we feel on this really core, deep level, that no matter how much we think about it, is not going to change it. It's not going to transform it. So, whether it's when you're talking about a guide, I really believe that experiential work is the most effective form of transformation, to be in an environment in which you're led through experiences that allow you to get out of your head, that are not about, even talking about the quadrinity or a left road, right road. These are great tools. And without the experiential piece of really knowing what it is to disidentify from patterns, to really know that feeling of what it is to be innately good, it becomes more just information, which is good information, right? So when you're talking about a guide, whether it's the Hoffman process or another process or workshop, or for some people, it leads them to plant ceremony, and all of that is all good. I have found that it is important to have a path that you're guided on, because we don't know what we don't know. And it takes oftentimes someone else to hold a mirror up to us to be able to challenge us or see what it is that we're missing. And certainly some of this work you can do on your own, absolutely. I just find that the really powerful transformative work happens in community.
Well, and I agree with that. I've always, yes, I have a coach and I work one-on-one with my coach, but I'm almost always in a community-based class, because you learn through other people's experience. And if you're in a pattern and that is your habituated pattern, it's really hard to see when you're in the pattern when the only person you're talking to is yourself. And so it's self and self. Is this a pattern? I don't think it's this pattern. I think this is a good pattern, even if it is a pattern. And then you're like,
all the rationalizing. I often, I say this comes from a different Hoffman teacher, Ed McClune. I think I'll attribute it correctly. And I'm sure he got it from somewhere too. But fight for your limitations and you can have them.
Say that again.
Yeah. Fight for your limitations and they're yours. That's what he says. Fight for your limitations and they're yours. And that is so often what we do. And what I think is, when you're in a course, I'll speak, about the Hoffman process because that's my experience, where you're being challenged to think or look at things in a different way. And someone is saying, hey, reflecting back to you, seems like this is the only way that you know of to be, or you're really fighting for your limitations here. That it allows someone to be able to look and say, oh, well, maybe I am, or have I ever considered that there is a different way to approach this? So when we're trying to do this stuff on our own, that's one of the ways that we can get in our own way, is through rationalizing, fighting for our own limitations. Well, I can't change because this, and this, or I need to be this way, or whatever.
Or what if I change and I lose my mojo? I lose my edge. And so one of the things I'll say that I was really happy about and impressed with is when I went to the Hoffman process, there was people who are practitioners and make a living through therapy and coaching and leading meditation and leading yoga and leading companies. And they were all there to up their game. And so I think when you're really on the learning journey and you have a growth mindset, there's nothing that isn't possible for you through taking on yourself. And it's always powerful to do it in partnership. And so we have just about 10 minutes left. What I'd like to do is tell people how to find the Hoffman process. Yep. And I know you guys have something on Instagram where it's welcome and open. And so share all that, and then we'll do a quadrinity check.
Great. Yeah. So our website is hoffmaninstitute.org. And you can get information about who we are, what we do. As I mentioned before, we're a nonprofit organization. So we do award partial scholarships to do our courses for anyone who is in need of that. And let's see, our Instagram is at Hoffman Process. And we do, so if you like the quadrinity check-in, I'm about to lead you through, we offer them every day on Instagram Live. Every morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, we do a quadrinity check-in. And then in the evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific, we do appreciation and gratitude. And anyone can join. You don't have to have done one of our courses to join in. You can just be a part of community and get a little taste of what we have to offer.
And that's how my buddy got introduced to Hoffman, was through doing quadrinity checks on Instagram.
Cool. Awesome.
All right, so let's do one. I'm excited.
Okay, great. So this is a mindfulness meditation that will allow you to check in and access each of those four aspects of self. So close your eyes and take a deep breath in and out. And become aware of your body. Noticing your body sensations, places that are more tense, more relaxed. You might notice your breathing or your heart beating. But tune in to what's going on with your body right now without any judgment. And from this awareness, now ask your body, what do you need or want from me today? And trust whatever comes. It may come in the form of sensation, or you may get a word or a phrase. And then send some loving appreciation to your body for all it does for you, for its mobility, for being able to connect with yourself and others. And say softly out loud, thank you, body.
Thank you, body.
And notice how your body responds to being seen and acknowledged. And take a deep breath in and out. As you now shift your attention to your emotional self. So this is the emotional feeling part of you. And tune into what you're feeling in this moment. And you may be feeling more than one thing at the same time, even conflicting things at the same time. But we're always feeling something. So find a word or two to name what you're feeling. And sometimes it's also helpful to get a sense of how old you feel in this moment. Our emotional selves can regress in age. So just ask yourself, emotional self, how old are you right now? And trust whatever you get. And from having tuned into this really important and tender part of you, you are better able to ask your emotional self, what do you need or want from me today? And trust whatever comes. And then send loving appreciation to this aspect of you for helping you navigate the world, for letting you know what you're feeling on the inside, connecting with others, empathy, and say softly out loud, thank you, emotional self.
Thank you.
Notice how your emotional self responds to your gratitude and being seen. And then take another deep breath in and out. As you turn your attention to your intellect, the thinking part of you, your mind. So notice in this moment any thoughts that are going through your mind right now, without attaching to them or needing to change or fix them. Just notice them. And also notice the quality of your intellect in this moment. Is it racing, foggy, going through a to-do list, checked out, or maybe it's focused? But again, there's no judgment. It's just loving awareness, noticing, oh, wow, what's going on in my mind right now? And from that loving awareness, you can better answer this question as you tune into your intellect. Ask your intellect, what do you need or want from me today? And it might be something really simple like, I just want to be heard by you. But listen into what your intellect needs or wants. And then say softly out loud, thank you, intellect. And notice how your intellect responds to your gratitude and to being seen. And now take another deep cleansing breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. You can even let it out with a sigh. As you turn your attention to your spiritual self. So this is you at your best. And you can take a moment right now to reflect on a time that you felt connected to yourself, in the flow, present, spontaneous even. And call to mind other qualities that you know to be true of yourself when you're at your best. And this can include good boundaries, being able to speak up for myself, confidence, trusting myself. And as you breathe in those qualities that will be unique for each of you, embody them. Notice how your body posture naturally shifts as you breathe in and take on those qualities that are true of you at your best. And take a few more deep breaths into this place of grounded knowing. This is you. You are spirit embodied. So from this place, ask your own higher self, your spiritual self, for a message and trust whatever comes. It may be a word or a phrase, or it might be an image or lyrics to a song or a felt sense. Now take a moment to send appreciation and thanks to this wise aspect of you, magnificent even version of yourself that is connected to your path, to your inner wisdom, your inner knowing. And then once again, bring your attention back to your body, noticing your body sensations. You might even wiggle your fingers and toes, bringing yourself back into your body. Notice again what you're feeling in this moment. And then allow your eyes to open.
Great beginning to the rest of my day.
Yay! So that's a quadrinity check-in. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Marissa. Totally appreciate it. Whether a person is interested in doing Hoffman or just interested in having liberation at work, I think we gave them lots of good nuggets and certainly a good new kind of meditation practice. So thank you very much. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.